stated in our last Part 1 video, when it comes to analyzing crime rates, it is sometimes difficult, as the numbers can be very skewed depending on the source. I also contend that issues affecting the crime rate are far more complex than most civilians realize, and maybe even more than some police officers and police brass realize. In our last video, I brought up, what does police staffing and morale have to do with crime rates? Well, think about it. If there are fewer officers on duty to respond to crime or prevent crime in the first place, then crime rates may go up. Officer morale also comes into play. Many call these types of situations depolicing. So again, statistics may not be telling the whole story here, especially in more recent years. NBC News ran a story in early September 2023 that noted that America is in the midst of a police officer shortage that many in law enforcement blame on the twofold morale hit of 2020, the coronavirus pandemic and criticism of police that boiled over with the death of George Floyd by a police officer in Minneapolis, Minnesota. From Minnesota to Maine, Ohio to Texas, small towns in particular found that they were unable to fill jobs, with many eliminating police departments and turning over police work to their county sheriffs. At the heart of the problem was the exodus from law enforcement. Officer resignations were up 47% and retirements were up 19%. That was according to a survey of nearly 200 police agencies by the Police Executive Research Forum, a Washington, D.C. based think tank. Compounding the exodus of veteran officers, young people were increasingly unwilling to go through months of training necessary to become a police officer, said Chuck Wexler, executive director of the forum. Fewer people are applying to be police officers, and more officers are retiring or resigning at a tremendous rate, he said. There is a shortage of police officers across the country.
While Seattle's population is skyrocketing, the number of Seattle officers have practically stayed the same as it was in the 1970s. But now, a bigger problem.
I've never seen the number of officers who are leaving and the way they're leaving.
The Seattle Police Department says since the beginning of this year, 41 officers have left the force, something that's not unusual due to retirements. But another source within the department telling me that 20 of those officers left Seattle for other departments, which is unusual, saying the morale has never been so low. Quote, worker bees on the street, they don't feel appreciated. I've never seen anything like this in my life. The police union calling it a mass exodus, something it says will have a direct impact on public safety.
Less officers on the street is less safe for the citizens. And when you have an officer that you've invested all this money in, you put them through the academy, and then they're leaving for Tacoma and Olympia and Pierce County and Snohomish County.
So why is this happening?
Just depressing to serve in a place where you have many city council who are coming out at times with negative comments about the police.
They say council members Mike O'Brien and Shama Sawant have been very critical of the police department, with Sawant even calling 2 officers murderers soon after an officer-involved shooting. Rich O'Neill says officers are afraid to do their jobs, especially when it comes to low-level crimes. He says city leaders are allowing activities to go on without accountability. Now, the union has been in contract negotiations with officers not getting a pay increase for the last 3.5 years. It is a point of contention, but O'Neill says city politics is what's causing officers to walk away from Seattle for good.
I've been here since 1980. I've never seen the city in the condition that it's in. And, it's because it's been allowed from all levels.
The Brennan Center for Justice is an independent, nonpartisan law and policy organization / think tank that works to reform, revitalize, and when necessary, defend our country's systems of democracy and justice. It notes that the murder rate in the U.S. has dropped from a high in the early 1990s, when the crack cocaine epidemic and gang wars were relatively high, to a new low in 2014, and then noted some small rises and drops in the murder rate since. They note that violent crimes reported to the FBI steadily dropped from 1990 to 2022 when their study concluded. Brennan's study noted that crime rates went up from 2020 to 2022 in often liberal North, Northeast, and West Coast regions of the U.S., leading many to conclude that the Democrats are weak on crime, while in more conservative Republican states, the crime rates went down. There were some exceptions. The crime rate in New York City, for instance, despite its violent reputation, actually went down from 2020 to 2022 by 5.7%. The violent crime rate reduction in Chicago was even more drastic, dropping by 20.4%, according to statistics. Possible explanation for this is gentrification that has occurred in many large urban areas with above average past gang and drug problems. I mentioned this factor many times in some of my past gang videos. It may also explain why crime has gone up over past decades in some outlying suburbs, previously considered to be relatively safe middle class neighborhoods. Once again, raw statistics may not be giving us a totally clear picture of what is actually happening. A notable claim of the Center for Justice study was that property crimes dropped dramatically from 1990 to 2022, but many people feel this stat is misleading due to what appears to be less police calls to reports of property crimes, which may lead to citizens feeling demoralized and less likely to report future thefts. I can tell you that is what I often hear on the Big Island of Hawaii, and I've personally seen it with my own eyes. The laws and courts here are relatively weak. Police staffing has been an issue here, like in many places. If available officers are called and respond and do make an arrest, nonviolent suspects are often soon released, since there is little room in jail even for violent charges. If the suspect does not initially make the often low bail, they are often released by judges on reduced bail and conditions after their first appearance in court. This often even applies to violent suspects. Dozens and dozens of neighbors have told me these kinds of stories and state, why even call the police? Nothing ever happens. Many times a city, county, state, or region is considered to be more violent or relatively safe based on past experiences and personal perceptions. Most criminal justice experts agree there are many factors that may affect the crime rate. Among these are economic factors. Unemployment, poverty, and income inequality can contribute to an increase in crime. This is often used by liberals as an excuse for why some people commit thefts. They contend that an individual who is very hungry will steal a loaf of bread to survive. But what many don't explain is why well-dressed teens in designer clothes will mob a store and target only high-priced items. It is obvious to me that these places have been scouted out in advance. These organized retail thieves knew exactly what to take. They are often trained and organized by older adults who know teens with little to no criminal record are likely to get little, if any, time in the juvenile system. Another factor is the easy access of guns in the United States. I've often said it is easier to get a gun in America than to buy a car. These firearms can be easily purchased on the street, and a growing trend is the problem of ghost guns, which are much harder to track. These firearms are often used in crimes to help give the culprits an upper hand. Of course, many Americans state this is exactly why they carry a firearm or have them in their homes, often unsecured, which makes it easier for them to access, but it also makes it easier for burglars that target them. This video is not a debate on the Second Amendment or on the gun lobby. Perhaps I will do one on that issue in the future. Another factor is drug abuse. Substance abuse can lead many to criminal behaviors. There's no doubt about it. Drug addiction will often lead to some people committing crimes to finance their drug habit. Liberals also make excuses for this. I've always felt that nobody put a gun to their head and told them to use hard drugs. That was a choice. So the lesson should be, don't start. I do agree for nonviolent crimes that drug treatment would often be better than incarceration in a jail or prison that does not focus on their addiction problems. I also believe that there should be repercussions for not following through with court-ordered drug treatment. In other words, you should only get so many chances. Another issue is lack of education. Limited education can increase the risk of being involved in crime. It is not the focus of this video, but education is relevant to the crime rate. When I classified offenders for nearly 2.5 decades at the King County Jail in Seattle, one of the first questions I asked was, how far did you go in school? The answer, on average, was about the 9th grade level. So it was obvious to me that education played a key factor in whether or not a person becomes involved in crime. And another issue is the mental health system that may contribute to criminal activity. I think most people would admit our mental health system is broken, with little signs that public officials are serious about fixing it. Some cities appear to try to do something about homelessness, which is dominated by drug addicts, the poor, and the mentally ill. Some seem to let it run rampant, maybe even do things that attract more homeless from out of the area and make people dependent on the system without properly addressing the issues that caused it in the first place. And as with other statistics, depending on the source, some state that mental illness has little effect on violence, some state that it has a major effect. Most agree that individuals on medication are usually not a problem. Individuals with severe mental illness, not on their medications, can be a higher risk for being involved in violence, including homicides. We have severely and mentally ill people committing atrocious violent crimes all across the country, and nobody seems to be doing much about it. Granted, not every mentally ill person needs to be locked up in an insane asylum, like what used to be commonplace with the mentally ill before the 1980s. But our city and county jails now often have to deal with these individuals when they were not built nor staffed for it. Again, it's not the focus of this video, but the topic of the mentally ill is relevant to the topic of the crime rate. Whether it is the truth or not, many Americans feel less safe. The Pew Research Center's two primary sources of government crime statistics, the FBI and the Bureau of Justice Statistics, paint an incomplete picture. Public attitudes about crime differ widely by party affiliation, race, and ethnicity and other factors. For example, Republicans and Republican-leaning independents are much more likely than Democrats and Democratic leaners to say that reducing crime should be a top priority for the president and Congress. 68% versus 47%, according to the Pew Research Center. Another thing to consider is most crimes reported to police are not solved, at least not solved based on an FBI measure known as the clearance rate. That's the share of cases each year that are deemed to be closed or cleared, either through an arrest, charging, and referral of a suspect for prosecution, exceptional circumstances, such as the death of the suspect or a victim's refusal to cooperate with the prosecution. In 2022, police nationwide only cleared 36.7% of violent crimes that were reported to them, and only 12.1% of property crimes that came to their attention. Nationwide, clearance rates for both violent and property crime are at their lowest levels since at least 1993, according to FBI data. These perceptions and facts may explain why so many people today think that crime is getting worse. Hopefully, I've laid out some of the important issues for you that may affect crime in America. On the bright side, police staffing rates are showing signs of going up again. At the Washington Criminal Justice Training Center, where I once was a TAC officer guiding new recruits through the academy, classes are beginning to fill up again, but it should be noted that many agencies now have an experience problem, possibly an officer safety problem, with many officers having less than 5 years on the job. Hopefully, the majority of those officers will be guardians of our democracy, who are fair, firm, and consistent. Being a guardian does not mean that they have to throw away their role of sometimes being a warrior, with the knowledge that sometimes they may have to use force. As my big brother Tony Moreno once put it, warrior and guardian are just two more of many roles that a frontline officer must fulfill. He states that in talking to frontline officers, he could tell that many were upset, resentful, and frustrated by management's lack of concern and respect for them. Everyone else's opinion about their job seemed to be more important. The spirit of doing police work was being sucked right out of officers by a leadership they perceived didn't have respect or support for them and catered to public opinion. This can be a very serious problem. One solution is a balanced mix of intellectual ideas and theories blended with the value, wisdom, and experience that only can come from a frontline practitioner, meaning frontline officers, which will be some of the main participants in reducing crime in America. What are your thoughts on all of this? Please let me know in the comments section. In my next episode, we'll discuss hate crimes in America. Until then, I hope you stay blessed and please be safe. For now, this is Gabe Morales signing off for Gangsters, Cops, and Politicians.